Thanks for joining us, and a special thanks to your church for this opportunity to visit with you. Today, our goal is to explore miraculous generosity and the Lord's miraculous response. To enhance our understanding, pastors from across the state are going to share biblical stories. Now, each New Testament example will demonstrate how an average person's gift was received and then how it was miraculously blessed and even multiplied by our Lord. After the video, your facilitator will guide you through a short discussion about miraculous generosity, and together you will complete the handout. So listen carefully as each story unfolds and be thinking to yourself, what can we learn? What is its truth? And does it still apply today? Let's begin our journey together.
Hey, today we're in Southwest Virginia, right on the shore of South Holston Lake. I've been to this lake hundreds of times, but one story about this lake stands out to me more than any other. When I was a boy, probably early teens, we were out on the lake, we were behind the boat being pulled on the tube. You know how that goes. We're just having the greatest time ever. And another group of guys pulled up beside our boat and they said, hey guys, why don't we all go down to the cliff and jump off the cliff? That sounded like a great idea to a bunch of guys, so sure enough, we get our boats and we head down to the cliff, and I remember seeing that cliff. It stands out in the middle of the lake, and the closer we got to it, it seemed like the higher it got. We finally jumped out of the boat, we swim over to the edge of the cliff, and we go through some briars, and we get up to the edge of the cliff. Now it looks like it's forever, 35 feet or so. And my best friend, he doesn't even think about it. He just jumps off the edge of the cliff down into the lake. I'm thinking, that guy's crazy. My heart is racing, you know how it goes, and I'm afraid with everything within me. But I knew if I thought about it very much, I'll never jump. And so I took a good run and go, and I jumped as fast and as hard as I can and landed in the lake, and we had the best time ever. You know what that story tells me? Sometimes you just have to face your fears, embrace the adventure, and take a leap of faith. Do you not? And that takes me to the story in Matthew 14 that Jesus is out on the shore, he's praying, and all of his disciples on the Sea of Galilee, much like where we are today. And a storm comes up in the middle of the night. And while they're out in this storm, they get fearful. They become afraid. And in their fear, Jesus knows they're afraid. And so he comes to them walking on the water. And as he comes to them walking on the water, they look out of the boat, and in the lightning and the thunder and the waves, they see Jesus. And who among all the disciples jump out of the boat? None other than Peter. Man, can't we identify with Peter? All of us can identify with Peter. He's just an ordinary guy, just like you and me. And he takes a step of faith, and he jumps out of the boat. And here's the deal. He actually walks on water, a miracle, toward Jesus. Pretty incredible, isn't it, what God can do when we take a step of faith? Well, you know the story. He begins to look at all of his surroundings like we often do, and he begins to sink. But hey, don't be too hard on Peter. None of those 11 guys took a step of faith, did they? They're all in the boat. And Jesus comes and rescues Peter, takes him back to the boat, and the storm ceases. It's pretty miraculous when Jesus gets a hold of our life, and he honors when we take a step of faith toward him. You know what I've learned about my faith journey in my life? This is always true. When we offer the gift of faith, the Lord provides miraculous opportunity.
How are you guys doing today? We're here at one of the many marinas that you would find in the Hampton Roads area, and as we're here today, I just want to take a moment to share with you a little bit around the concept of what it's like to give our work to Jesus. You see, I was raised by a mother who came to the United States in her early 20s as a migrant worker. She made an incredible life for herself, working very hard. And as a kid, she instilled in us the concept that if we could find something we love so much and get so good at doing it that we could get someone to pay us to do it, we will never go to work a single day in our life. Well, for me, that actually took a little bit of a different turn because I didn't find something, I found someone. When I was in high school, I found a man named Jesus. And I decided through reading his word that he wanted to give everything about the best part of life to me. And the way to experience that in my vocation was to work for him. So no matter what job I've ever had over the years, I always made a decision that I'm not here to work for myself or my employer. I'm here to work for my God. And through that, it's been an incredible journey. And I've worked all kinds of different jobs. I remember in Bible college, I worked just about any job I could to pay the bills while going to school and preparing myself for ministry. But I discovered something amazing. Ministry doesn't happen when you graduate. It happens when you're on the journey. You see, one time I had a job as a pizza delivery driver. And I'll never forget, as a delivery driver, before I worked, I would pray. I'd ask God to give me an opportunity to shine a light and to just give myself to him while I'm there. My manager came to me one day and he said, "Freddie, I need to talk to you. I want to know what your secret is because you average more than twice as much per delivery in the size of tip you get than all of our other drivers. And what's your secret? I want to know." And I told him, I said, "I just work for Jesus. I trust him with my finances and I ask him to bless me while I'm here." He was a self-proclaimed atheist, and so he didn't believe me. So one shift, he decided he was going to ride in the car with me to see what I really was doing different. And shift after shift, delivery after delivery, tip after tip, he just stared at me, surprised, and he said, "Wow, I can't believe it. It's actually what you said it was." About 2 months later, I had the joy of leading him to Christ and baptizing him. Over the next year, he and I together led about 9 guys to Christ that worked together in that store. And we actually had to have a Bible study for all the guys that had come to know Christ in that pizza delivery store. I'll never forget that part of my life because it trained me and prepared me for a life in ministry. In Luke chapter 5, we read the story about these guys that are on the beach and they are fishermen. They have boats, kind of like the boats in the background here, and that's how they make their living. Well, Jesus is preaching on the shore and there's such a large crowd that shows up that he looks at these empty boats and he asks them, can I take your boat and stand in it? And they pull him out a little bit from the shore so he can address this huge crowd. After he's done addressing the crowd, he looks at these gentlemen in their boats and he says, "Hey, why don't you pull out one more time into the deep and cast your nets again?" Now these men are seasoned fishermen. They've lived their life doing this, their career doing it, and they had not had a successful night. One of them actually speaks up and says, "Master, we've been fishing all night and we have not caught anything." And then Peter says this, but because you asked, we'll do it again. So they go out to the deep and they do what he says. And wouldn't you know, their nets are so full of fish that as they haul in the load, they almost sink both of their boats. They get back to the shore and they unload everything and they realize that Jesus has just invited them into something much bigger than they could have imagined for themselves. As they're there at the edge of the shore, Jesus looks at them and says, "Hey, how about you join me and become fishers of men?" And that begins a journey that changes the rest of history. The Bible tells us that day that not only did they leave their boat, not only did they leave their nets, not only did they leave the fish that they had just hauled in, they left everything to follow Jesus. You see, when we offer the gift of work, the Lord provides miraculous impact.
I'm here today in a physical rehabilitative center here in Richmond. As I stand here, I am reminded of a story of a wife who lost her husband to cancer. As I recall this story, I got the phone call that he was on his deathbed. And as I went into the room, this wife was very, very distraught. As you can imagine, she really loved her husband, really cared for her husband, and she could not see how she could live life without her husband. As a pastor, I tried my best to give her some compassion. And in that compassion, it was my prayer that she would be able to see a sense of hope of what was available to her in the future. As time passed, and unfortunately her husband did die to cancer, but there was some hope in this particular story, because months later, this wife came by my office and began to share with me how much she appreciated our show of compassion to her during her time of need. And because of that, she is now offering us scholarships to students to go to college. And now we're able to have 5 or 10 students now being able to experience life at a higher level from an academic standpoint. Because of this lady's compassion, now these students are able to find some hope. As I think about that story, and as I think about being here in Richmond in this center, I'm reminded of a story in the Bible that talks about this man who was paralyzed. And being in this physical rehabilitative center, it just reminds me of my blessing to be able to have the use of my limbs, but this man could not walk. And he heard about Jesus and heard about how Jesus provided a sense of miracle to a blind man. So I'm assuming in his mind, he felt that if I could just get to Jesus, that there may be some hope for me. But as it turns out, as he arrived to the house was packed. The house was full. So as he came into the house, he actually became disappointed that he couldn't get to Jesus. But the Bible said he had 4 friends who actually lifted up his bed, took him to the roof, tore open the roof, lowered him down so their friend could have a chance to connect with Jesus. And the Bible says that when Jesus connected with this man, that Jesus gave this man hope by healing him and told this man to take up his bed and walk. Not because of him, but because of the efforts that his friends went through to lower the bed in order for him to be with Jesus. And isn't that something, that it is our extra effort of compassion that oftentimes we're able to receive some miraculous hope. And I just pray that we as leaders, as Christian family, that we would have the ability to show more compassion. As a matter of fact, have a gift of compassion. When we offer the gift of compassion, the Lord provides miraculous hope.
I'm in Old Town Alexandria, just across the Potomac River from Washington, D.C. Our community in some ways is a snapshot of many communities, cities, rural areas around our country. We have extraordinary abundance, but we also have pressing needs. In our country, for example, one of the pressing needs we face is the issue of hunger. 41 million Americans struggle with hunger. 13.2 of those are children. The UN reports that the global problem with hunger is extraordinary. 795 million people live in malnourished situations out of 7.3 billion in the world. That's 1 out of 9 people struggling with hunger. Here at Downtown Baptist, we seek to try to address the issue of hunger through a ministry called Open Table. Through Open Table, we feed the hungry and the homeless in our community. Volunteers gather and they bring what they have to help with this need. Some prepare food, some buy food and purchase it. Some make casseroles and bring them in advance. Others come and sit with our guests and listen to their stories and provide hope and help through words of encouragement. Through this ministry over the last year, we have served over 1,000 meals with breakfast on Wednesday mornings from 6 to 8 a.m. We also send each of our guests with a bag lunch so that they have something to eat later in the day. There's absolutely no way that one person could handle this ministry and meet this need by themselves. And so when we come together, the Lord does miraculous and amazing things. This ministry reminds me of the story of Jesus when he fed the multitude. Jesus was teaching his disciples, and the crowd started gathering around him. And as the day went on, the disciples started to get worried, and they wondered how in the world would the people eat. And so they came to Jesus and they said, Jesus, send them away. Now, I tend to think the disciples were well-meaning here, that they wanted the people to be able to eat, but they didn't know how to meet that need. And so their best shot was to let them go and stop listening to Jesus so they could go to town and buy something to eat. But Jesus knew that people struggle to learn if they're hungry. So Jesus puts the ball in the court of the disciples, and he tells them, you feed them. And so the disciples had to be bewildered. They had to wonder. But they do in faith wait out in the crowd, and they come to Jesus with simply a lunch from a little boy of 5 loaves and 2 fish. So Jesus takes this lunch and he does his Jesus thing. He takes it, he blesses it, he breaks it, and then he distributes it among the crowd. And they ate that day. Their hunger was satisfied. And not only did they eat that day, but they had leftovers. This is an amazing story from the life of Jesus, and we learn from this that Jesus takes our inadequacies and he divinely enables us to do the work of God. When we do our part, when we bring what we have in faith, when we offer the gift of possessions, the Lord provides miraculous outreach.
So if you think miraculous generosity is something we only see in the scriptures, well then you haven't heard the story of Maud Hobgood. See, Maud was a woman who was born in 1914 in the little town of Grundy, which is nestled in the Appalachian Mountains in Virginia. Maud grew up with a mother who really focused on instilling in her the qualities of hard work, the importance of education, family values, and of course, a strong faith in the Lord. So Maud, being a great student, went on to study beyond high school. So Maud went to school at West Virginia Business College, where she studied and prepared to work at Flat Top Coal Company. If you've never heard of Flat Top Coal Company, at one point it was the #1 coal producer in the United States. So Maud worked there for a while until she met her husband, Everett. She actually met him singing in a church choir, and that's something that they continued to enjoy for years to come. Maud and Everett hit it off, got married, and gave birth to a beautiful girl, Barbara Louise. So Barbara Louise was an only child, which meant that Maud got to give a lot to this special daughter. They focused on things like dance, faith, and again, the importance of education. And Barbara Louise had a great upbringing. Eventually, Maud served at her church. She also worked for the Virginia Baptist Mission Board, where she brought her lunch every day, right here to this break room where I'm sitting. This was where she enjoyed her brown bag lunch and really chose to live frugally in a way that allowed her to save a lot of what she earned. Maud was an excellent caregiver when those around her fell ill. Sadly, she buried both her husband and her daughter before she herself passed away many years later. Maud was really inspired by education, and so in her daughter's honor and her memory, she established a special scholarship at Bluefield College through her will, so that students could attend there and could benefit from her generosity for years to come. Maud frugally saved, and she humbly gave several generous gifts. She gave in the areas of faith, work, compassion, and possessions. And as a result, we can say that surely the Lord is pleased with this humble widow and her miraculous generosity.
These stories beautifully demonstrate the power of miraculous generosity. You know, in Scripture, the Lord calls us to be generous at all times and with all things. Our faith, our work, our compassion, and yes, our possessions. In return, He miraculously multiplies our impact, sometimes for eternity, and He often blesses us too. But being generous isn't always easy, especially when it involves our possessions. We have different goals and many concerns. Let's see how the professionals at the Virginia Baptist Foundation can assist.
So one of my members wants to actually set up a trust for our church. He doesn't think he has a lot of money, and he's so afraid that he's going to outlive the money he has.
Virginia Baptist Foundation is here to assist. Guided by Christian values, the Virginia Baptist Foundation can share ways to meet current expenses while planning for future generosity. Our ministry provides knowledge and expertise, having helped Christians with charitable estate planning for nearly 100 years. We can discuss ways to structure your estate now that will extend your stewardship to your church later. Faith is the foundation of planned giving, for without faith, it is impossible to please God.
A fellow pastor supports lots of causes, and he wants to help even more people, but he doesn't know how.
A donor advised fund could be a great solution. By utilizing one of the fastest growing charitable instruments, an individual can receive tax benefits while simplifying future charitable efforts. A donor advised fund is essentially a charitable giving fund, which allows an individual to be efficient, strategic, and at times anonymous in support of numerous ministries and charities. And one of the neat things of a donor advised fund is that it can be invested for growth, potentially blessing even more ministry both during and after a donor's life.
An elder in my church wants his money to keep working and maximizing interest so that he can maximize his estate.
The foundation offers tools like charitable remainder trusts that make the most of a gift. Everything from appreciated stock and vacation homes to treasured artwork and even farm equipment can be used to create a charitable remainder trust. It offers tax savings and grows through investments. The trust also provides an individual with a stream of income for life. At the donor's passing, earnings from the trust begin benefiting the individual's church and other named nonprofits. Charitable remainder trusts make it easy to both give and receive.
I know a young couple who are struggling to make ends meet, and deep down they know they need a will, but they think it's too expensive and that the process is just too complicated.
Whatever your age, whatever the value of your estate, it's so important to have a will. Otherwise, the state of Virginia will decide. Who wants the state to determine what happens to your house, your car, your money after you're gone? Virginia Baptist Foundation can share in charitable estate planning options and recommend trustworthy planning attorneys.
We've just seen and heard a lot about miraculous generosity, and we've also been reminded that God's multiplication of gifts isn't limited to biblical times. It continues today through our obedience and our gratitude. So what are your next steps?
Ask God how He wants you to use your gift of faith.
So why don't you pray about what He wants you to do through your gift of work and service?
Respond when He brings someone into your life who needs your gift of compassion.
I hope you'll consider giving a gift of your possessions in faith and watch what God will do. Contact the Virginia Baptist Foundation for more assistance.
The Bible reminds us, be generous. Invest in acts of charity. Charity yields high returns. May you and I generously give our many gifts, and may God richly bless all with His miraculous generosity.